In this developer tutorial, I'm going to explain how you can now set up and do a tournament locally on your computer while you're developing your game. The purpose of this is to allow you, as a developer, to test out all the features the API provides without having to keep hoping that once you've integrated the API and uploaded it to the site that everything works. This allows you to just test everything right then and there and get some nice feedback just to make sure everything's good to go. Okay, so the first thing we need to do to get this started is that there's a few new parameters that we need to pass in to actually make these new API calls. So to do that, first thing you need to do is go log into the site, go click on the developer button, and then now you'll see a new value called the player ID. This is your player ID, which we need to actually pass in the player ID now so we can start setting up local tournaments. So let's copy that. And go back to the code. Now for this particular example, I'm going to be using the Pummelhead demo code, which is the source code for the clicky game on the website. And I provided all the source on the developer wiki so you can actually download this, open it up, and see how everything works. Okay, so we have the Pummelhead init function like always, which basically initializes the library. Now we're going to be adding in one more new parameter at the end. In the latest version of the SWIC, which is 0.4.0, there's two new parameters called game ID and player ID. So right now, this first one is game ID, which we don't have yet, and the second one is going to be our player ID. So let's just put that in there. And as you can see, scroll down a bit. See, it says game ID and player ID. Okay, so now let's get the game ID. Let's go back to the site. Now click on update/test game. Click on one of your games. And then now you'll see a new value called ID. This is essentially your game ID, represents your game in the Pummelhead system. So let's just copy that because we're going to need it as well. Switch back to code, and then paste it right in there. That's where the game ID is going to be. Okay, cool. So let's actually save this and then give it a test run and see what happens. Okay, so now with the latest version of the API, it now traces out a whole bunch of information so you know what's going on in the debug console inside the API itself. So the first thing here, you can now see a new message called Pummelhead. So you need to create sandbox first. Please call create sandbox tournament. Okay, so now there's another new function in the Pummelhead API, which we can simply access using Pummelhead and to create sandbox. Now, before we start actually calling it, I want to explain these parameters real quick. Okay, so when you call this function, you're basically creating a new tournament object in the system, which will then create a tournament on the sandbox server, which then allows you to actually start testing stuff locally. So the parameters are this name, description. These are all have default values in them, so you don't even have to name the description or anything. There's join time. The join time defaults to 30 minutes. That's how long the tournament will last. Then there's the timeout. The timeout is essentially a period of time after the join time. You don't have to worry too much about that. It's set to a default of 5 minutes. So the entire tournament time comes out to be 35 minutes long before it would end. And then there's the mode type, mode lives, mode time. As you know from previous tutorials, every tournament has different ways of being played. So just to kind of make it easy, I've set the default to normal mode, which means there's no special conditions, and mode lives and time have both been set to 0. So you don't even have to really worry about anything. So if you wanted to, you don't want to customize anything, you can simply just go create sandbox, close it off, and you're done. It will use all those default values and create tournament of normal type with that lasts for about 35 minutes long, which is plenty of time for you to do some quick testing. Okay, now remember, this is a really important thing to always call the create sandbox tournament function before the initialize function, simply because inside the initialize function, it's actually doing all the background checks and creating a sandbox server and all that good stuff. Now, remember that if you don't pass in the game ID and player ID, even if you do create sandbox tournament, it's not going to matter because it's not going to be able to find you on the sandbox server, and it's not even going to work. But let's just give it a quickie test and see what happens. Save. Okay, so we got a bit more information here. Creating a sandbox tournament. It's creating the sandbox tournament because we call that function. It's adding the new sandbox tournament for testing. And when every time you call something in the API to the Pummelhead system, it will always return back a code and a message. So this is the result from when we were trying to add a new tournament. We got code 23,000, and it couldn't find the developer's game on the sandbox, which makes sense because we haven't actually gone through the process of requesting access to the sandbox server. So to do that, simply go back to the website, and then on our selected game here, you'll see this new button called Sandbox Access, and it's called Request. This will actually give your game access to the sandbox. So this will allow it to be recognized on the sandbox server so that when you're testing stuff locally, we can find you and give you access and you can start doing everything. So all you gotta do is very easily just click the button. Once it's been clicked, you get this message saying you've been added to the sandbox. Now you can do local testing. Okay, so now let's go back to our code and let's try testing it again. All right, cool. Since we haven't been given access, the code that came back is 11,000, which just means it's good to go. The message is success, and we can now start playing the game and testing it. So remember the game. The object of this game is to simply just click on the screen as many times as fast as you can before the time gives out. So let's just keep doing that. Click, 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 click. Almost done. Come on. Ah, there it is. All right, now the game's over. And as you can see right here, back down the debug console, how the game works is that you click on the screen as many times as possible. When a time gives out, it ends the player's session, meaning they can no longer play the game and they're done for the tournament. And as you can see here, internally, because I called that in my game code, it's also outputting that as well. So ending player's game session result, meaning everything went okay. Now also you can see right above that, I also submitted the player's score as soon as the time was up. So you can also see that as well. It says on submitting player's score. And it does the code and means success, everything was good. And it also returns back the player's newest score. So basically this is the leaderboard. So if your game were to keep hitting the server continuously, at certain increments of time, every time you call submit score, it would actually show you the new score that would be in the leaderboard after the score was submitted. And also here's some more extra information that it will actually tell you every time you submit a score how many seconds are left in the tournament. So we'll just keep doing that so you can know how much time you have left. Okay, that is pretty much it for how to set up a local tournament. Just do a quick review. Remember to pass in your game ID and your player ID. And to create a quick tournament to test that's of normal type, you just simply call the function create sandbox tournament. If you wanted to customize it further, you can add the names, look at your test, description, test, whatever. Join time. Now remember, join time is in seconds. So like I said, it's right now set to about 30 minutes. So it's always in seconds. Same with the timeout as well. So let's just, if you want to do whatever. Now the mode type, to get access to the mode type, we do have some constant values that you can pass in so you know more easily with the different types of modes. And if you look at previous tutorials on how to implement the different types of mode types, you'll know how to get started with that. But yes, that is pretty much the process on how to get a tournament set up locally on your machine. And you don't have to change anything when you want to push your game to the production server. Well, it'll automatically recognize it. You can keep this code in there if you'd like, and everything will be good to go. So honestly, really the only thing you have to add to start testing stuff locally is just call this one function right before the init, and just remember to pass in your game ID and your player ID. If you don't pass in the correct information or you don't do it in the right order, if you look down the debug console here, we will make sure to very clearly tell you what mistakes you've made and what you should be doing. So it should be always remember to check here for information on what's going on. All right, that's it for this tutorial. Thanks for watching.